Right, okay.
Boop, boop, boom. Hello.
Hello.
I got to get organized. I got to structure my format here a little bit, Stephen. I got it all crazy to go. I'm just going nuts here.
Okay. Yep, no worries.
Hopefully we'll maintain internet connection today. All right.
Hope so. It'd be good if you could.
All day. Let me see. Which way do I got to swing here? That's always the issue with me. I got to learn this green screen stuff, Stephen.
Yep, indeed. I've just been adjusting the camera. And good evening, Barb. Good evening, Tommy. It's good to see you here. And we'll be underway.
Boom. I disappeared for a minute there.
You did. You're back now.
Yeah, I'm going to shrink my little box here. I want to make this look. Can you guys see this box okay? Does it look... let's see what I got on my screen here. Now, it kind of shows some of it. So it'll show up in the final recording. Okay. And we'll get a glimpse of what's going on over there. So I'm kind of going to town. I got everything on over here. You can't see everything. Right. So let me move my little Twitter feed. Okay. If you guys want to follow along or make some comments out on Twitter, please follow the hashtag across the pond. I did discover, Stephen, there is a radio broadcast that uses the same name.
Indeed, there is. Indeed, there is. I mean, it's a well-recognized phrase, but it does describe exactly what we're doing, which is connecting the UK and the USA and talking about living in both countries and the good, the bad, and the amusing. And,
absolutely.
We're joined by a common language and a heritage. So it'd be good to talk about those.
And Stephen and I were talking about the fact earlier that myself, I'm from a family who served in the War on Independence, and it was our separation from Great Britain that gave us America. But I had family that actually fought on both sides, Stephen. They were some that fought for the Republic, and there were others that fought for the mother country and the Queen. And it was because they were very comfortable in what they were living. They weren't ready to turn over tables and make it a fiasco because their life was comfortable.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of a struggle for me sometimes to go on these types of ventures when it comes to the Revolutionary War and say I'm on one side or the other because my family was on both sides. So it's like, where do I go with that? What do I do with that information?
Indeed. I mean, from the UK point of view, we've got a very close relationship with the US.
Yes.
And presidents in recent years have acknowledged that, and we work together. We work together globally as countries.
Let me take my flag down a little bit so everybody can see what I put behind me here. I had it zoomed up rather large originally, so I have a split flag here behind me. I have the British and the American, so I'm not just the American side here displaying. I'm kind of displaying a blended flag, you might call it, because our colors are all the same. So,
indeed, and this is sort of a trial for a series that Leland and I are going to do, and we're going to ease our way into it gently. And I'm going to be doing vMix training in weeks to come.
Yes. Yeah, I was just contacted by my buddies over at Streaming Dudes asking how things were going with my my efforts to get people to understand vMix and how it works and let them realize that there are free versions available that can be used with no cost. And obviously for those people who want to get into the more professional streaming and doing all the things that I'm doing here, obviously takes a pro version. I'm using their most elaborate version, which is around $1,200. Gives me all the overlay features like the lower thirds and the secondary overlays for the screen above me and the Twitter feed, which is actually, I can use Twitter, Facebook, a lot of different aspects for following hashtags and @ symbols out there on social channels. So that's just something I wanted to let everybody see at one time. So.
Yep. Well, I'm going to be using vMix as I ease myself into this technology and broadcasting to Facebook Live, and the next one show I'll be on vMix as well. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we're living in interesting times, don't we? Because the video is changing so quickly.
Yes, it is. And I haven't even touched on all of the possibilities out there. I just saw that Tumblr is now wanting to get into the live streaming arena. Facebook obviously has not touched on all the possibilities that it could get involved with when it comes to live streaming. we're certain to get more windows involved, more features, more shareability and usability. And Twitter, has Periscope, but I've been seeing and hearing a lot of odd talk in the back there also of some other things that Twitter's considering. So, and not much that can be said publicly, of course,
Right,
but
okay.
it's just there's a lot of people jumping on this live streaming bandwagon now and making efforts.
Indeed, and we're seeing the start of people setting up training enterprises so that you can go along and learn how to present. I mean, some of it comes naturally, but there is a way of doing it which comes gradually, doesn't it? You can't just leap in overnight.
And I had intended, Stephen, on doing a live streaming academy, which was part of the reason I came over here to FireTalk.
Yeah.
And I actually have a pay-per-view event scheduled for this evening. It was originally scheduled for last Wednesday, and then the Wednesday before that. I've had a lot of life experiences that have popped up in the way of that training course, which was primarily focused on how to use vMix in an environment like this. But it's not getting much, let's just say, engagement.
So traction. I mean, we all got together on Blab. Yes. And in the early days on Blab, there was great traction. I mean, you put a show up and you get viewers. Oh, for sure. Now we've got a situation where we're comfortable using technology and we can create shows with good content. That's not the problem. The problem is the viewers. And I'm pretty sure that if we put our thoughts together, and good evening, Patricia, if we all work together, we can find a solution to it. But it's not going to happen overnight.
No, and a lot of people are desperate from the experience, I think, Stephen, that a lot of people got so involved with Blab and that they saw all this discoverability and suddenly they became, if you want to just put it out right, there were instant celebrities created on Blab. There really were. And it was nice to see, but I think what we found since then is because of its one-off nature, that Blab had a unique audience and it had unique features that aren't available everywhere else, and a lot of people got used to that. Now we see a lot of people jumping over to Huza, which is obviously another live streaming platform, very, very similar to Blab, but it's a pay-per feature. Yeah, you're going to have to subscribe to a monthly payment, which there's obviously this awesome software key code or coupon offer that was given by the owners over there at Huza for those that came over from Blab originally. So they're adding features, obviously, so that could be the next big thing after Blab. But there's so much more to come. There really is so much more.
That's true. And the thing I like about FireTalk is the stability. Yeah. And the quality of the video is just incredible, really, considering that we are separated by the Atlantic Ocean and we're appearing here and we're live and everything's in sync. It's a miracle, really.
The thing I've really found cool about WebRTC, Stephen, is I can literally run 2 different platforms at once.
Right.
And not have any lag in the video. I could be running in Huza on another tab right now and be sharing the same camera on WebRTC versus doing a stream out through an RTMP feed, which is what has been the norm for at least 10 years now. With this connectivity, the real-time connectivity, which is what WebRTC stands for, is the real-time connection. We have this ability to do away with the lag. And as speeds increase, we're only going to reduce that lag that much more and be able to do all these neat little things that I'm doing on the screen at the same time. And this kind of comes back to, where are you most comfortable? What works for you?
Yeah, indeed. And that's just a question of experimenting. If your situation is you want to go one-to-one with someone else with questions from an audience in text, then I don't think you could do any better than FireTalk. No. And if anybody has any comments on FireTalk, then if you want to just post those in the live chat. And good evening to Bob and to Roy. I mean, it's a situation that we're spot for choice, aren't we? We're spot for choice.
Yes. And speaking of choice, you guys are dealing with a big choice right now. I mean, we had our choice to free ourselves from Great Britain, and now it looks like Great Britain's deciding to free itself from the European Union over there. So
yeah, I mean, I've just returned from a 4-day trip to France, because the town I live in, which is Devizes in Wiltshire, is twinned with a town in Germany, Weiblingen, and a town in France, Mayenne. And we cycle through visiting each other. And the simple thing is that members of each community in France, in Germany, and in the UK will host. So I go over to France and I'm hosted by a French lady and her husband, and we spend the weekend there and we're entertained royally over the course of 4 days. And it was brilliant. So this year there was a question, and the question is, what is Brexit? Now, on Thursday, 64 million people, over 60 million people in the UK will decide whether we leave the EU. Now, the EU has been going since 1975, and basically, like in USA, you can trade across states, we can trade across countries, and we can sell into France and Germany and Italy, and there are no tariffs. Yeah, so we can sell at the same price all around a market of 500 million people. So the benefits of being in there are, well, self-evident, because we all have want to trade more. The more we trade, the more people in work in our own countries, and the more people can earn. Now, in 2010, we had in the UK a coalition government, and that coalition government was between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. And whilst we had the two, there was a balance. Here, by the way. Yes, okay. There was a balance, and everybody was happy. But then another smaller party became involved called UKIP, and UKIP basically are not in favour of people coming into the UK and working. Now, to give you an idea, we get 300,000 people a year coming into the UK to work here, to work and live here, and they all pay their taxes and they all contribute to the economy. But the UKIP party say we shouldn't have all these people coming in.
Yeah,
simple as that. We're taking too many in. We can't afford it. We shouldn't do it. And the UKIP vote in 2010 was around about 2%. So nobody bothered about it. Nobody bothered about it at all. But unfortunately, by 2012, their share of the vote was around about 14%. Now, this gave the Conservative Party a problem, because half the party are on UKIP's side. They want to come out of the EU and for Great Britain to be great again. So our Prime Minister at the time said, right, okay, the only way I'm going to solve this, and the only way I'm going to get rid of the rift in my own party, is to ask the question of everyone in Great Britain, do you want to remain in Europe or do you want to leave Europe? Straightforward question. And we vote on Thursday, and it's a yes or no. There's no other options. And we had, as I just described, a divided political party. 300 people fighting amongst themselves as to whether we should have more immigration or less, and whether we should be part of the EU or not. 300 people. By virtue of the fact that this is now going out to 60 million people throughout the UK, we now have a divide created in the UK.
Oh, I bet.
And it's causing arguments. It's causing problems all around the country, because people are becoming passionate about whether we should stay or go. And it's got to the stage where people who emigrated here and became British are becoming worried.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because if we leave Europe, can they stay here? Will they go home? Will they be sent home? And it's just a situation where it's totally stupid is the word to use. Our Prime Minister made a promise that he would give us the vote. He should never have done so. And on Thursday, we vote whether to stay in the European Union and trade freely with 28 other countries, or to leave and have to renegotiate trade
with every country,
with every single country. And Europe has a trade agreement with the US. We'd have to negotiate our own. Now, as a market, we are 65 million people. Europe is 500 million. Are we going to get the same rates from the countries, other countries, from the USA, from other countries in Europe, France, Germany, Italy? No. So,
Not at all.
if you don't already know which side of the fence I'm on, I will state it publicly now.
I think you
I'm
made
on the
yourself
side of
pretty.
Remain, but my partner, Angelica, is German, and she has a British passport
Oh,
because she's a naturalized citizen, and even she is worried as to what's going to happen if we vote out. So we shall see what happens on Thursday. It's a close call, 42% for, 42% against, and 16% haven't made their minds up yet.
undecided. Yeah.
Yeah, and in actual fact, if you want a background to this, as to why we're doing it, I'm just going to post a link if you're interested in looking at it further. There's a news article, and also in relation to that, on last week tonight, John Oliver explained it too.
And John Oliver being who?
Sorry, I thought he was American. No.
I wouldn't even know who John Oliver is.
All right. Okay. Sorry. In that case, just enjoy watching. It's called Last Week Tonight.
That'll work.
And it's on HBO. Sorry.
I just wasn't prepared for John Oliver, so I don't.
All right. He's on. No worries. He's on HBO.
Oh, okay. I know who he is now.
Now you know why you don't know.
And I use Showtime. I don't use HBO, to be honest. So, and just for those who don't know the UK that well, in the corner, obviously on this overlay screen that I have here is just a small chart showing the United Kingdom and the fact that you can travel the entire distance from the north end of the country to the south end of the country in about 13 to 14 hours. Depends on whether you're breaking the speed laws or not, I'm sure. But when you compare that to the US, obviously, it takes us about you could add it up to 41 hours across the Interstate 80 West that runs from the very tip of New York City or into the Philadelphia area all the way out to San Francisco. So that journey in and of itself is about 3 times the length of what's taking place over there in the UK on a daily basis. Now, I wanted to ask you, Stephen, I know the British pound has always been a monetary way of dealings there, but how does the euro play into Britain's economy right now, currently? And what will happen after this vote if things go awry? Okay.
Basically, Britain is the 5th largest economy in the world, okay, behind the US, China. And so we have a very strong economy, and have done for quite a few years now. So we are stronger than the economies in Europe. But if we do come out of the EU, then our exchange rates will just fall. And we could, because nobody knows, we could lose trade, we could lose jobs, a whole range of things could happen. I mean, in Europe, London is the financial center of Europe. Okay, the London Stock Exchange, recognized around the world as one of the leading stock exchanges, along with the New York Stock Exchange. Would it relocate? Would it move to Germany or France? We don't know. I'm not scaremongering here. It's just anything could happen if we did leave. But at the moment, because we're having the campaign, it's been going on for 2 months, we've lost out anyway. Our economy has been affected already. I don't know what will happen after Thursday. But yes, it's an interesting point. I mean, it cuts across people, it cuts across finance, it cuts across a whole range of topics.
Yeah. And how long is the tally take for a vote like this to take place in the UK once the votes have been placed?
Right. Okay. We've got in the UK 650 constituencies, which are basically voting areas. Each of those voting areas will count separately paper ballots. Yeah. And they'll start returning. We vote until 10 o'clock at night. And the first results will start to come in around about 11 o'clock. And between 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock Friday morning, we'll get a real idea of what's going on. So our counts are reasonably quick. So we'll know by Friday morning when we wake up what the country has said and what the fallout from that is. As I say, voting Remain.
And even with the vote counted and established, then because obviously here in the States we have what are called electoral votes that are somewhat take precedent over the individual vote when it comes right down to it in a lot of places. But and I understand, like in your parliament, it's much different, obviously, than the way it works over here. We're also dealing with that issue of voting right now in general with our Republican and Democratic nominees that are
indeed
not really a fun choice. Not much of us have a decision to make. Well, many of us have a big decision to make here ourselves as to where the U.S. is going to go moving forward. Now, I'm not a very political person, as I've let you know in the past, but I do keep track of some of the things that are going on, and I intend to vote for that which I feel is appropriate. But it's certainly not the level of activity that's going on your end of the world right now. We're dealing with issues that are ethical issues and moral issues. The issues with homosexuality and guns are obviously the big things that we're trying to address over here, when really you're addressing the issue of whether your country is going to remain part of a union with 28 other countries that are key to the way things are done over in Europe, where and I think that trade agreement issue is probably one of the biggest things that you guys are going to be contending with. And I can totally feel why that's going to be a stress on everyone that does business in the UK. So,
well, I've talked a moment ago about the situation that we are polarized, 42% for, 42% against. You've got a similar situation in the USA, because your voters, Democrat and Republican,
two-party system,
and they're opposites, aren't they, in terms of
in a sense, yes, because the Republicans are primarily conservatives when it comes right down to it, very fundamental when it comes down to their views and perspectives on religion and ethics and several other aspects of what should be taught in schools, what shouldn't be taught in schools. When you come to the Democratic end of things, which is more liberal and much along the lines of what you guys have over there, is more of a socialistic environment. There are a lot of very scared individuals here in the U.S. when it comes to socialism, because they have seen it crumble in other countries. They have seen it falter and fail. And yet there are also other examples in countries like Sweden and Denmark and the UK that show that socialism can, and even Canada with their socialized healthcare, it's kind of a rocky slope there, because some people love the system, other people hate the system. It's definitely against what the Republic of the U.S. was established as. It was never intended to be a socialist country or a country based on any type of socialism whatsoever. So I think that scares a lot of people from the beginning. I don't sway either one way. I look at it as though there should be a happier medium somewhere. I think the two extremes that we've generated here in a two-party system have caused a lot of the problems with the U.S. I feel that way. A lot of people argue with me with that, but I don't want to argue over it. So,
well, it's essentially in 2010 we had a three-party system because neither of the two main parties was able to get a majority, so they had to do deals. And the deal that was done was that the Liberal Democrats, who were sort of between the left and the right, became sort of joined the Conservative Party to rule the country for 5 years. And to a certain extent, they tempered conservative policies. So we had effectively, I mean, Italy always has a coalition government. This was the first time that the UK had a coalition government for many years. Now, if we go to a month from now, you've got the conventions. Now, we were talking earlier, and situation is that you've got the two candidates that we know about in the UK. You've got Hillary Clinton and Mr. Trump, but there may be other people involved. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are third parties that can come out of either the Green Party, the Reform Party, the Libertarians. We have the Constitution Party, the Natural Law Party. There are several other aspects to our governmental system, but that third party it's not typically a sway vote. It tends to be one that disrupts whatever the other two are up to. It shows where the country stands. A lot of the country will say, well, I'm not voting Republican or Democrat. And a lot of them I've actually pulled. I put on my placard years ago that I wasn't either party. I'm not Republican, nor am I Democrat, though at one point I was probably much more Republican conservative than anything. From that stance where they split the party and made you delineate which you belong to, I said, no, thanks. I'm not going to do that because I want the freedom of choice that I deserve. So if I want to vote an independent party later, I have every right to vote whatever party I want. But those parties usually don't have enough backing or enough individual push to really make a difference. They'll get people yelling and screaming and talking about other aspects to the politics involved, but it tends to pull away from perhaps the better candidate and pulls votes away from the one that may need those to win the primary. So it can be a good and a bad thing, depending.
Well, and do you expect a third candidate to stand in the
there is
election?
One that has stood up just recently, and I know Barb's in the crowd here. She actually knows him, I believe, personally. Gary Johnson out of New Mexico, who is the current governor of New Mexico, has stood up and basically stated that he is running as a presidential candidate in the third party. He's independent, I believe. He's not libertarian, is he, Barb? I believe he could be, though. I believe he might be a libertarian. I haven't really checked much into him, so I just saw him recently show up, and he's kind of like one of those, like Ross Perot did years ago. He was,
yes.
He was a guy that came out of nowhere, had a lot of money, and just said, "I'm going to run," and that's what he did. He caused an uproar, but he didn't get very far. So,
well, do you think? I mean, the other name that we've heard a lot of in the UK is Bernie.
Is what?
Bernie.
Bernie.
Yeah.
Yes, and I love what he represents. In all essence, Bernie is one of those grassroots types. He's that underdog Democratic nominee who could take that card and run with it. But I think his social agenda is very much one that people of the Republican side don't want to vote for. He sides with several of the components that are Democratic all the way through, but he's not bought out by big banks and corporations and Wall Street and all that. So he's more of the farmer's choice, you might say, to that regard, rather than the guy who's going to make a big difference. But he's been in politics for 30 plus years, for 40 plus years, who knows how long it's been now, well, all of his life. He's always been present here in the U.S. political system. So he's, honestly, I think the better choice for America right now. I'm not a Democrat, but I've seen his platform versus Hillary Clinton. I'm sorry, I won't vote for Hillary. There's just way too much garbage and baggage attached to the Clintons that I don't want anything to do with them running another part of our office over here. I just don't think it's couth. I think it's very inappropriate for them to have a stance here in the U.S. political system.
From the UK, we know that Donald Trump has a number of investments throughout the UK, especially in Scotland. In golf courses, he probably owns a fair percentage of our good golf courses.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
But he is like our gentleman who runs UKIP, which is the anti-immigration party. That he knows how to play the crowd. Yes. And some of the things that he says, and I'm speaking from the UK here, I'm not going to vote in the US election. I'm not saying what direction you should vote in. That's purely your own choice. But looking at it from the UK, some of the policies and some of the things they've said, were they to be carried out, and we're assuming that they probably won't be, even if he does get into office, frighten people. Simple as that.
Absolutely. And I think it has every right to, because he is a loose cannon, if you ask me. He has a lot, but he doesn't even have that much money. Recent polls have shown that he's down to about $1.3 million in funding available to support his campaign. When you look at Hillary, she's in the 40s of millions, almost $50 million worth of funding available to her. So can he possibly even continue to compete? I'm sure he could pull some money out of somewhere, but we all know Donald Trump's up and down history of going into bankruptcies and several other aspects where he's just flushed a lot of his businesses down the toilet and started new companies and created new businesses that put a front to this look or fashion that he's so successful. when really he's never really been all that successful. He just continues to trump, as you might put it, the next guy, because he's been there. His dad had a lot of money, so he's following in his father's footsteps. He started his businesses with millions of dollars from his father, so it's not like this is all him from the ground up. Somewhat like a lot of the people that you expect to want to run a company are those who worked hard, diligent effort. You've got guys from back in the day, the Republicans of their time, were obviously those who served in the military. A lot of them, were almost bound to be generals, really, when it comes down to it. Some of these captains and lieutenants of military service became presidents of this company or this country. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then you have this guy like Trump, who's primarily an entrepreneur who built a business with money and stepped over a lot of people to get some of the money he gets. And now he wants to run a country. Well, is it really for our benefit, or is it for his own, is the real question here. Does he have an ulterior motive? So
that's the question that we're asking of our UKIP person as well in the UK. And the hope is that if we vote Remain on Thursday, then it will be the end of his political career. And the problem that's going to be left behind, though, is that there are divisions being created throughout the UK, and they will take time to heal. Certainly on immigration, it is going to take time for people to reconcile, and there will be those who never do. So politicians have a responsibility, and the responsibility is to look out for the best future for their people. And that's not just some of the people, that's all of the people. I think we share that view, in terms of how any country should be conducted. And that's why when it comes to policing the world, as it were, the UK and the USA can work together because we have shared values.
And I think you're right. There are a lot of things that we don't share, though. Isn't that true?
Okay.
I think a lot of times we think about the commonalities that we have between the U.S. and the U.K., and this kind of segues into something else. We've talked a lot of politics here in this first half an hour of the show. So I think it's probably time to turn it around a little bit and see what we can delve to be some of those things that aren't things that we agree on all the time. One of them being bacon, right?
Breakfast bacon, and the bacon should not be burnt.
What you guys call bacon is what we call ham, or
right, okay.
Canadian bacon maybe sometimes is what we consider, and that's probably where your bacon is much more similar to what we call Canadian bacon. Those strips of burnt crispy stuff that we pull off of the swine and put on our plates, and honestly, for a while there, myself being Jewish, I restrained from all pork products whatsoever. And there's a long backstory to all that stuff, and it's not just religious. It's very Dr. Kellogg himself, the inventor of the cornflake, had a lot to say about pork back in the 1800s. And if you've never actually seen the reports that he's done, you can go and make yourself some disgusting efforts to realize why some people don't eat pork. It's not just religious beliefs like the Muslims and the Jews, but it comes down to the way that the pigs process their ability to process the let me say the word if I can find it. Any type of infections that they deal in. You also have trichinosis, which is a worm that develops inside the meat, and if it's not properly cooked, you can deal with that issue too, and have what they say are bugs headed for your brain. But let's not go there because everybody.
No. But I mean, properly cooked bacon. We had a photo. We'll probably get one for next week.
For sure.
Of an English breakfast is bacon, mushrooms, fried egg, hash browns.
Oh, I like that.
And of course, if you're in Scotland, it's also haggis.
Haggis,
so
really?
Those are the ingredients for breakfast, and the bacon should be
juicy and plump and.
Oh, indeed.
That's what
much like bacon.
And that also stems along some of the other things, like your milk categorizing system is much different than ours over here.
It is. We've got full cream milk, which is the blue one. We've got half cream milk, which is generally a green topper, and then we have milk with all the milk taken out, and we call that skimmed milk. So skimmed, semi-skimmed, and full cream. And it's just those three.
That's kind of along the lines of ours. I saw in this article that we're referring to, by the way, is an article from BuzzFeed magazine. So these are just, it's kind of a comical look at the differences between the US and the UK, because it even says here, so why do you Americans persist on something called 2% and half that tastes just wrong? And honestly, Stephen, just so you're aware, the milk that we normally drink is whole milk, normally it breaks it down from there to 2% and then 0.5% and then skim milk. And 0.5%'s only been around for a shorter period of time. It was normally the whole 2% and skim. And 50/50 isn't really used as a drinking substitute. It's more used for baking or as a creamer for coffee. That's normal, or tea, of course. That's normally all it's ever used for. You won't find anyone drinking 50/50. It just, I wouldn't imagine drinking that stuff. It's a little thick for the palate, but I use it a lot, and I never use fat-free 50/50. That's about a joke. That shouldn't even exist. That there's something wrong with anything fat-free and 50/50 at the same time.
Yeah. I see. Good point.
Let me ask you this, Stephen. Have you tried the plant alternatives? Almond milk or coconut milk?
Soy milk.
Okay.
Yes. It certainly doesn't work with tea. The way we brew tea, and it can destroy coffee as well. So yes, I've tried it, but I wouldn't. If you offered it to me, I would decline politely. Gotcha. I think, and say, don't you have any, anything else?
Well, they're starting to make almond creamers now, also that are a little thicker than your standard almond milks. Because my wife and I now drink purely almond milk in a glass, or if we're going to put it over cereals or anything like that, we bake with 50/50 and we eat with the almond milk. So, because I'm a little bit lactose intolerant myself, so I prefer it. It goes through my system much better. And then, of course, this one really I found interesting.
Right. Okay.
Roast every Sunday.
It's tradition. It's tradition.
Really?
I will on a Sunday night at 6 o'clock start preparing a roast dinner, and the roast will either be chicken or ham, or as in this case beef. And it will be roast potatoes, it will be Yorkshire puddings, and possibly 2 or 3 more veg. And on the plate there we can see carrots and peas, and that's the way that we cook once a week. Now it may have come from tradition, but if you went to any house in the UK Sunday lunchtime or Sunday evening, the odds are that they would have a roast on the table. And these days, there will be a glass of red or white wine to go with it, depending on whether it's beef or pork. That's not everybody drinks, but
no, it's one of the occasions. I enjoy my glass of wine. My son-in-law actually loves to. He has 2 new flavors brewing right now. We just went through the white and the red recently, and actually, I was watching their home for a week while they were in Tennessee last week, and I was offered a bottle of wine for each day that I had to watch the house. So I managed to enjoy my intake there of his home brew. He's currently making a Gewürztraminer and some other form of, I want to say it was a sweet white wine that he's also working on there. It might be some type of Pinot Grigio. I'm not sure. Right. But yeah, I love my wines. I'm not much of a alcohol consumer, but when I do, it's usually wines or spirit.
That's where trade comes in. I mean, in the UK, if we go back 20 years, wine used to come from Germany, and it was white, and it was called Blue Nun, and that was it. Yeah. Now the situation in the UK is you've got wine from Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Italy, Chile. In fact, anywhere that grows wine will export to the UK because they know we're going to drink it. And
there's no tariff between the Europe.
And the price-wise has changed as well. It's about $7 a bottle.
That's good.
Yeah? But this is the thing about wine. There are connoisseurs. Are you a connoisseur of wine?
A little bit, but I'm not much.
I
could be better.
I prefer to drink a single grape. Okay, so never mixed, as it were.
I get it. I understand.
But the thing that gets me is that you can pay from $7 to $70 for a bottle of wine. Okay, now I prefer to come somewhere towards the lower end of that scale.
I'm always on the lower end. And let me tell you why, Stephen, because I did an interview with Brian Brushwood. If you saw the magician that I interviewed on Blab back in April, he's on the Discovery Channel and National Geographic. He runs a show called Scam School and Hacking the System.
Okay.
And they
Yep.
did they did a test, and along with Penn and Teller did this same thing. They supplied a very high-end restaurant with some of the cheapest wine they could find and served it to the connoisseurs that were at their tables for dinner that night.
Yeah.
They couldn't tell the difference between. They were telling them, "Oh, then this is a premier 1974 or whatever," and they paid like $3 a bottle for it, and nobody knew the difference or the better. So go cheap. Or go home.
Indeed, it's a similar story in the UK as well. But as long as it's single grape, no problem at all.
What about this stuff? You guys know all about it. The only thing we know about tea is how to throw it in the harbor. But
yes, tea is. I mean, you've got cream teas with scones and clotted cream from Cornwall, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You sit down in Cornwall and Devon. The sun's shining down, as it does sometimes in the UK, and you can enjoy a cup of tea. The only question we have in the UK is: do you put the milk in first, or do you put the tea in first? Now, some people never drink tea with milk, so they're a special case.
I don't. I usually don't.
Yeah.
I'm a honey and lemon with tea kind of guy, to be honest with you. I love honey and lemon with my tea, especially if I'm going to have it cold. If I'm going to have it cold, I prefer it without the lemon. I just prefer sweetened tea. And that's something I never hear brought up over from the other side of the pond is any talk of drinking cold tea. I always hear warm tea. So do you drink much iced tea?
Right. Okay. We have just the one brand over here, which is Lipton's.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We've mentioned one or two trade names. And yes, they've got both a cold and an iced tea. But the majority of the market is tea from former British colonies, like India.
Oh, okay.
The plantations out in India. A lot of our tea comes from there, and Ceylon. And that's where our coffee comes from as well. I mean, we're going back if we go back a couple of 100 years, our Navy made sure that we had access to all these wonderful products like tea and coffee beans. And
but it's
a tradition that continues.
But it's almost always a black tea that's preferred over any kind of green tea, if I'm correct, right?
Correct. That's correct. A green tea in the UK is seen as a health tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah. Similar sort of thing. But you've got to be able to brew. Yours? I like my tea. I can't abide weak tea. So if you put the tea and pour the water on, then then get rid of the tea. That's not tea. That's flavored water. If you want a cup of tea, then you've got to make sure the kettle is boiling, and then you pour the water over the tea, which is either in a bag or loose, and you leave it there for a couple of minutes to get the flavour into the water. And the ideal cup of tea is one where the first sip is just perfect.
Oh, I'm certain of that. And it was always the matter of over here we're looking to buy what we think are brands of tea that come from Britain. And you mentioned Lipton was the only choice for cold tea, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And that was only because it's the only bagged tea you can probably find over there, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have, typically Americans want something very easy and convenient, so they tend to flock toward the bagged tea.
Yeah.
Yet my wife wants to get herself a tea ball so that she can use her own. We'll order tea in bulk so that we can just go ahead and fill the tea ball and drop it in and steep it that way. But something we're still working on. I may have to see if you can order me one of those or find me a place to order.
Okay, but tea is an English tradition.
Obviously, and I do drink it. I love it. So the other thing, newspapers are so much different. I see this is the front page of the British Times, I believe. What is it?
The Times of London.
The London Times. Okay, that's where we're at here. And you can see, obviously, they've got some pretty slick colored graphics on the front page and nothing but graphics. There's no articles popping out, no serious, what we would call, excuse me, I've got a cough coming on.
Okay.
What we would call clickbait headlines over here in the U.S. that are always that silly story that's going on, whether it's a football player in crisis or a Hollywood actor on the fritz or whatever. Look at this. No. This is a pursuit of excellence. They're on the positive end, which I find brilliant. Is this typical of British newspapers that they're more positively oriented than negatively oriented?
I think so. There are, I mean, like in the US, there are a wide range of opinions, and the most popular papers in the UK, that's a conservative paper, or seen as one.
Okay.
Its owner is Australian. Part of your press is owned by Mr. Murdoch as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, um, but the papers are under decline in the UK. Are you finding the same? The internet's taking over?
It's hard to say. I think the baby boomer generation is still avid newspaper readers.
Yeah.
I still find them laying around. We don't have per se, like if I were to go to town, I'm not going to find a newsstand because now if you go to New York City, obviously you're going to find newsstands on the corners of the sidewalks because that's where everyone congregates. Here you're going to find newspapers at the end of a shopping store aisle, or you're going to have it delivered to your mailbox, which is typically the way we receive our newspapers here in this area of the country, where we have a plastic box mounted underneath our mailbox, and they just drop it off every morning for the free paper, which here we receive both a county-wide and a local paper. If I wanted to get like the Detroit News or the New York Times or anything like that, I'd have to order a subscription and have it delivered to my home. I might be able to find the Detroit Free Press out on a newsstand for a couple dollars or 75 cents, I think it is now, to buy a newspaper around here. But other than that, the local Argus Press and the Independent are the only ones that I would be able to get for free. So, I see here it says £1.50 on the front of this cover, I believe, is what I see. So that would be close to $3 for us. No. Yeah, yours.
250.
250. Okay. All right. So we were close.
Yeah. But we do have other papers.
Yeah, and tell me what this is all about. What is that thing?
What is that thing? That's an electric plug.
Are you sure?
The difference here is that the plug itself is 3 prongs. Okay.
Well, we have 3-prong plugs, but they look like that.
No,
that's dryer plug.
It's a question of style, but they have the same function. I think as we were chatting earlier, some of these choices that have been made are quite flippant. If you plug it in, it works. That's the end of it. But style-wise, I'm not sure. Well, I think it's a question of what you're used to.
Yeah, and you guys are on a different frequency than we are when it comes to electrical service. You're on a 50 megahertz frequency versus our 60 megahertz. That's why we have 120 volt, while you guys have 115, I believe it is. Is it not?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously you don't want to plug the wrong plug into the wrong socket, or you blow things up. But
true. I mean, we're in France at the weekend, and the plugs in France are very similar to yours, but they don't have the earth. They only have 2 prongs. There's no earth.
Oh, really?
So, well, yeah. They're health and safe.
You have a 2-prong plug, is what you're saying?
In France.
Oh, in France.
In France and Germany, it's just a two prong.
We have both, to be honest with you, Stephen. Yeah. My home right now is wired with both types because there was a period of time where all of our homes were wired with simple 2-prong plugs with no immediate ground to the system, as you call earth. This is prevalent in a lot of older homes prior to the 60s here in the U.S. And a lot of them, when they're upgraded, the entire system has to be upgraded to a grounded system, which is what you're referring to, again, as earth, where we have the 3-prong, the round plug being the grounded plug. And now we've even established, like, your 2 blades are the same on the bottom of that plug right here, where we see these 2 plugs here. We have one that's a different size than the other. And you can't really tell that well from here, but the one on the left, this plug right here, is actually a slight bit larger than the one on the right. So that way the 3-prong plugs that are designed here in the US actually have a one blade that's a bit wider so that there's no mistaking that plug design. And it's typical more on the old 2-plug design for lamps and home appliances like blenders and toasters and such. Those are the only ungrounded appliances that really exist anymore. Everything else that runs a motor, like a refrigerator or a stove, and even our stoves have a totally different plug after that. Do your stoves use for the 220 volt system that you have? is that a even wider design? That
No.
we have like 4 different styles of plugs for stove units that run on high voltage electricity.
Okay.
So we have 4 more plug styles after that, which I don't have pictures of here today. But
No, right, okay. Well, I look forward to seeing those, but we just have one.
that's it. Your 220 looks like this. How do you differentiate between a stove plug and a regular plug? There's no difference?
No difference.
Well, that makes things a lot easier.
The difference is each plug has a fuse.
Okay.
And the fuse rating on high energy appliances would be higher than that for
So you just replace the fuse with a different size fuse.
So you've got one plug and you've got 4 different fuses.
Makes complete sense to me. Now, we don't know what this Boots is. Obviously, we have several different pharmacies here in the U.S. We have Rite Aid and CVS and Walgreens and all these types of things. Tell me a little bit about Boots. How did that come to be, and what is it?
Boots has been around since the 1800s and was based in the centre of the country in Nottingham. And Nottingham is an area where they were heavily involved in clothing manufacture. And it's also where Boots started. It started as a small family company. Of course, it's now a public company. And they have pharmacy stores virtually in, say, 2/3 of the towns in the UK. And because of that, we get cost benefits. But they, in their store, would have a dispensing pharmacy. So you can take your prescription, your script in there. They have a whole range of health goods. They sell cosmetics. It's a one-stop store for your health, and they're national and well respected.
And then you go to our pharmacies, and this is what you find, or maybe it's full of cigarettes and alcohol, which is obviously we all know is somewhat an oxymoron when it comes right down to the facts. Americans haven't quite established the fact that these things are bad for them. Although we know they are bad for us, we just haven't really separated the two yet from the things that are good for us. So you can find them in the same location. I'm sure you can't find cigarettes at a Boots store, correct?
No, you wouldn't find cigarettes at a Boots store, even if they were herbal cigarettes. Then no way would they stock cigarettes. Cigarettes in the UK, I mean, the consumption of cigarettes is falling rapidly.
It's starting to. Yeah. And I think the same's happening here with the generation X and Z that are starting to realize the detrimental effects and the way that they've been advertising the luxury of getting cancer and having surgery. Kids are starting to open their eyes and realize that it's no good. I had a smoking habit for a long time. I've quit several times. And I just, as of recent last June, this has been a year now for me that I've gone without smoking. So I'm done. I'm not going to mess with that stuff anymore. I've made it a point at 50. I definitely have to. I'll be 50 in August. So it's to that point where my health is only going to begin to deteriorate. I don't need to expedite that process whatsoever. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
I agree.
Well, Stephen, I think other than that, I'm going to save some of these for next time. We've got a lot of other stuff here that we haven't discussed that are differences between us and the UK. So stay tuned for that stuff next time around. We'll have a little fun with that when we come back next week, and we'll move on from there. So, Stephen, do you have anything else you'd like to attribute to the show this afternoon?
I think that as we say, we're finding our feet on this, and we hope over the coming weeks to be able to build bridges between our two countries and to find out more about each other, about politics, about a whole range of topics. We did the politics tonight because it is pertinent to both of us, because the decisions made in the UK affect the US, not as much as decisions made in reverse there. Because our economy is reliant to a certain extent on the US economy, which is the powerhouse, as we've come to know.
And so, I kind of wish the US wasn't like that so much as the powerhouse, but
well, I mean, the situation is that we're both watching the Far East, we're both watching China, and there are two countries in the world which have the ability to overtake, and those are China and India. Yep. Both have the populations, and what they don't have at the moment is the investment.
True.
and but it goes in cycles. It does go in cycles. But the US is the rock on which most commerce is built.
And I obviously, being an American with a British heritage, I find it difficult at times to really express my true opinions when it comes to foreign affairs, because and honestly, even on my mother's side, I'm only 3 generations out from Austria-Hungary. So my family came from Buchan on my mother's side, which is still a part of, well, it's not, I don't have the name for it. It's a very long, elaborate name now, but the city still exists in another form. But it was running from all that tyranny and coming to a country that also ran from tyranny. And yet now we find those people that we tried to run from are also trying to separate themselves from something that they find somewhat overbearing in their country. Yet I totally understand where you're coming from, because I think you're more correct in the fact that your country is going to suffer extremely with all of the things that they have managed to create and managed to develop with their sovereign nations out there that are part of this union. But now you have to start all over again.
Yep. We would, but I'm the people who generally know what's going on in any election are the bookmakers, the bookies. True. And they take bets, they make money on this decision. And the odds on people voting Remain are short. The odds on people voting Leave are long. So if the bookies know anything, I'll be very happy, man.
And it just goes to show 2 totally different political systems can come up with similar results, but there are obviously many different challenges that each of us face on either side of the pond. So thanks, Stephen. It's been a wonderful show. Can't wait to look forward to the next one and what we can come up with as we continue to move ahead.
Likewise, Leland, it's been a pleasure. Thank you to everyone who's watched us tonight. We'll be back next week, and we'll explore further our mutuality. Thank you, and good night.
Take care. See you guys.
Bye.